Coming to you from beautiful Studio A here at Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs, it's time for the Gardening Simplified Show with Stacey Hervella, me, Rick Weist, and our engineer and producer, Adriana Robinson. All right, Stacey, today we're going to sing the blues. We're going to celebrate the color blue, one of my favorite colors, blue. As a matter of fact, I think most of my clothes are either blue or black.
I think that those who watch us on YouTube might know that.
Yeah, exactly. So now, of the multitude of known flowering plant species in the world, less than 10% produce blue flowers. I can't prove that. That's just what I read. But blue is a little rare in plants, even rarer in the animal world. Although if you think about it, bluebirds, blue jays, indigo buntings, even the eggs of a robin are blue, right?
Yeah,
So,
and blue jays are very abundant around here, at least.
Exactly. We experience blue hues as cool and find them calming, soothing, and relaxing. And in the garden, blue flowers have another interesting quality. They seem to recede from us. Now, not recede as in S-E-E-D, but C-E-D-E.
I knew that because so many blue flowers are very hard to grow. And if they were to be able to reseed, people would be a lot happier.
Exactly. Now, I love this quote from my friend Alan Armitage. He's a professor at the University of Georgia in Athens. When he talks about blue, he says blue is genetically a difficult color to find. When it's dark, it's purple. When it's light, it's lavender. So the perfect blue is the apex. Blue is the most elusive, most coveted color in gardening. Stacey, do you agree?
I'd say, yeah, that's probably true. I mean, speaking from, of course, a hydrangea perspective, then yes. But, you know, when you think about all of the other truly just, breathtaking blue flowers, the one that leaps to mind for me is Meconopsis, the Himalayan poppy, a plant that everybody wants to grow, but very few people can. Delphinium is another great example. People love them. The color, when you look closely at a delphinium, it really is breathtaking.
It is stunning.
But they don't really do super well in really hot climates. Of course, there's been some breeding that's changed that. But, I think that blue hydrangeas, Meconopsis, and delphinium are probably three plants that people really, really, really wish they could grow well and very often cannot. So yeah, I would say that's true. But then there are some other great ones like, Brunnera has beautiful blue flowers.
Fabulous. Yeah. Gorgeous.
And a lot of beautiful blue foliage too with hostas.
I think what we'll do is we're going to give you a list at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. We'd love to have you visit our website. Some of these favorites, of course, interestingly enough, blue does have some negative connotations, feeling blue with cold, and in some cultures it's the color of mourning, and yet, I don't know, those references notwithstanding, it's arguably the most popular color in the United States and the United Kingdom, as I understand it. At least they have my vote.
Yeah, I would say that makes sense. Cars, clothes, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So using blue in the garden is great. And of course, we've talked about what a hot summer it's been for some folks too. And when you put blue in the garden, it kind of gives you an oasis cooling effect. And, but I tell you what, I guess tops on our list has to be right off the bat. Hydrangeas?
Has to be. Yeah. Yes, of course. But not all hydrangeas, just Hydrangea macrophylla or the bigleaf hydrangea.
Yes.
Also, to a lesser extent, Hydrangea serrata, which is closely related. But as we'll discuss in Plants on Trial, which I'm guessing, spoiler alert for our listeners out there, is going to be a hydrangea. Other types like panicle hydrangeas, smooth hydrangeas, those cannot change color. So we'll talk a lot more about color in Plants on Trial.
That sounds good. Now, I know you have a favorite perennial, Stacey. At least I think you've mentioned this. Amsonia.
Love Amsonia, yes.
Amsonia. There's Stormcloud Blue Star, and you want to talk about a stunning blue in the landscape. Now, I like something as simple as Festuca glauca, which is just a little short blue grass.
I like that too.
I don't know if you know this, but for a number of years, I was Mr. Green Thumb on the ABC affiliate here in West Michigan, and that was my TV name, Festuca glauca.
It was?
That was my TV name.
Oh, and people could pronounce it?
Yeah, Festuca glauca. That was my name. Mr. Green Thumb, Festuca glauca.
It's a very nice plant. Very, very durable, very pretty.
Now, a plant that I don't have a lot of experience with, but I have real interest in is sea holly, Erengium, I believe is how it's pronounced. Perfect for cut flower gardens. There's a variety called steel blue. I can't believe the color. Blue for that plant, sea holly. And then, Stacey, we would be amiss if we did not bring up Caryopteris.
Oh, of course. Bluebeard. It's right in the name.
Yeah.
Blue Mist Spirea, if you prefer that name.
Is Caryopteris relatively easy for folks to grow?
Extremely easy to grow as long as you have sun and well-drained soil. Very durable, very easy to grow. If you're successful with butterfly bush, chances are you're going to be successful with Caryopteris as well. And, you know, it's great because it blooms so much later in the season. A lot of these other blue flowers we've talked about are more early season, you know, like the blue Himalayan poppy, the Amsonia, those bloom earlier in spring, whereas Caryopteris really starts to come into its own in September here in Michigan.
Fantastic. Vitex, I love that plant. Yep. Is it Blue Diddley?
Blue Diddley is the variety that we offer through Proven Winners. Yep. Okay.
All right. I love Vitex. In the heat of summer, that plant still, to me, smells like Vicks Vapo Rub. I can't help it. It just does. Annual salvia, like playing the blues, rocking blue suede shoes, fabulous. Draw all kinds of hummingbirds to my garden. On Cape Cod, yes, I saw a lot of delphinium and campanula in bloom. Of course, with bulbs, you've got muscari grape hyacinth, Siberian squill, of course, hyacinths. That color is amazing. Pansies. You have some pansies with unbelievable blues.
Beautiful blues, yeah. Classic.
Blueberries, of course, agapanthus, lily of the Nile. Love that plant. Streptocarpella. And I'm amazed at the number of varieties, like above the clouds or water slide as it relates to hosta. Blue hostas. I like blue hostas.
I think they're lovely. I mean, I can't grow them. I did hear someone say that they thought that deer had more difficulty seeing the blue hostas at night, and so they were less likely to be eaten. I definitely did not find that to be the case myself, but your mileage may vary, as they say.
I'm going to test that theory. I love that.
I'm not endorsing it, just say, from my experience, but I'm putting it out there.
I have a favorite flowering annual in hanging baskets. It's Scaevola.
Oh.
Scaevola, native to Australia, can really handle the heat.
Did you know that that is the plant that launched the Proven Winners brand?
No, I did not.
Yes. So they were trying to, they found the Scaevola.
Interesting.
Yeah, they found the Scaevola in Australia. It was used as hanging basket because it's very drought tolerant, very heat tolerant, very easy to grow. But, you know, they were like, how are we going to introduce this plant that no one in the U.S. has ever heard of? How are we going to build up their trust that this is a good plant? And so some growers got together to propagate and market it. And that was the birth of Proven Winners annuals.
That is interesting.
So that was Whirlwind Blue.
I like that.
Which is not really around so much anymore. But I am growing a blue and a white Scaevola. And this is the first time I think I've had them in my garden. I know we're talking about blue flowers. But I am absolutely in love with them. So vigorous.
Me too.
Just covered in flowers. Just a fantastic plant.
Each of the flowers looks like a hand, an outstretched hand. You had mentioned Brunera, of course, Agastache, beautiful blue color, and of course a favorite of both Stacey and mine, Baptisia, the Decadence Blueberry Sundae. You got to grow that one.
Oh, so pretty.
So pretty. Veronica or Speedwell, and we had talked about perennial geranium last week. You can get some pretty color there too. Ageratum, of course, Russian sage, Proven Winners denim and lace. Lavender has got to be on the list. Proven Winners sweet romance. There's another one on the list. Some of the supertunias. I'm amazed at the blue color. And, of course, morning glories, angelonia, and pulmonaria is another one, nemesia. The list goes on and on and on. So,
you know what I'm growing this year that's a blue annual is Blew My Mind Evolvulus.
Oh, yes.
And that is a truly gorgeous, true blue.
Color. It's just unreal.
The only thing, and I do love it, except that I realized this weekend as I was admiring it, I'm like, wow, I haven't really been like admiring this plant much. Like, what's wrong with me? And I realized it's only open during the day. the flowers are only open during the day and then they close at night. So by the time I'm coming home from work and enjoying the garden, and so on a beautiful Saturday, I'm like, oh yeah, well that makes sense. So that's a plant to enjoy, when you're home, but such a beautiful blue color. And one of my other favorites is the crystal blue salvia from Proven Winners, the Color Riot Crystal Blue. That is such an incredible color. I mean, it's one of those colors, as most blues are, but you have to see it to believe it, because it's just so hard to actually believe it's such a beautiful true blue.
You, of course, have the Nepetas, Cat's Meow, Cat's Pajamas. Again, the list goes on and on. We'll put the list at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. I love combining the color pink or silver with the color blue also in the garden.
I think we may have just contradicted ourselves.
How did we do that?
Well, because we were talking about how rare blue is, and then we spent the last 5 minutes listing off our favorite blue flowers, saying not only that we love them, but that we grow them. So,
Point well taken. Well taken.
But that said, there is something to be said. There is a little thing that the industry is guilty of, and that is horticultural blue. A lot of times the industry will call something blue that is blue adjacent and not a true blue. But, color is very subjective. But in any case, you can find something on the blue spectrum to grow. It might not be your dream blue. It might not be that amazing Meconopsis Himalayan blue poppy, but you can find something close enough to blue to satisfy that blue craving.
Exactly. Blue tulips. Blue tulips. I love blue tulips.
They have blue tulips?
Blue tulips. Well, actually, they're not blue. Yeah, exactly. They call them blue. We've got a blue tulip. No blue tulips.
Just like
I'm
purple.
waiting for it.
Yeah, and there's no blue roses either. And this all has to do with the, pigments that those plants produce. They can't actually get to that color because they don't have the pigment genetically, within them.
I'm still waiting.
Oh, in the case of both roses and tulips, there's plenty of other fabulous colors to choose from. So,
if you have a favorite blue, use your 2 lips and speak to us, and let us know at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. Plants on Trial coming up next here on the Gardening Simplified Show.
Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show, where we do not have the blues, but we're talking about blue all day long here. And, when it comes to plants on trial, if blue is in the conversation, there's, even though we have the Caryopteris, even though we have the Vitex that Rick mentioned before, there's one clear choice here, and I'll bet you predicted it when you thought of the blue show.
No question.
Gonna have to be a blue big leaf hydrangea, and my pick for today's plant on trial is brand new Let's Dance Sky View hydrangea.
Wasn't that the winner of Shrub Madness this year?
Yes, it was. As a matter of fact, it was. Yeah. So big leaf hydrangeas are the ones that turn blue. And not all hydrangeas can change color based on their soil chemistry. But it's the big leaf hydrangeas like Let's Dance Skyview that can. And so let's just clear this up right off the bat. Yes, you need to have acidic soil for a hydrangea that can turn blue like Let's Dance Skyview to actually turn blue. But that's not the whole equation. You also are going to need to have aluminum in the soil. And we talked about this a few weeks ago, but it's always good to refresh everyone's memory about it. So you need to have acidic soil and there needs to be aluminum in it. And if those two things are true and you have a hydrangea that can turn blue, then it will be blue. And just which blue it turns does somewhat depend on your pH, but it's primarily genetic. You know, a lot of people think, oh, I saw the most beautiful blue hydrangea and I can just approximate these conditions and my hydrangea will be that same blue. And that's not the case. They are individuals and they do differ from plant to plant. So not every hydrangea that's capable of turning blue is going to be equally as blue. And Let's Dance Skyview is one of those that lives up to its name because it is a beautiful sky blue. So it's not that like deep purpley blue that some people call blurple. That sounded very funny, didn't it? Blurple. Because it's a combination of blue and purple. But Let's Dance Skyview is just that gorgeous like summer sky color, provided that you have those conditions, acidic soil and aluminum present in the soil, for it to turn blue. Now, a lot of times people will buy, and I'm sure you heard this a lot working in the garden center, they'll say, whether it's an old-fashioned variety like Nico Blue or one of our varieties like Let's Dance Blue Jangles or Let's Dance Skyview, they'll say, hey, blue's right here in the name. Why isn't it blue?
Right.
And the simple fact is that under regular growing conditions at a nursery or garden center, that potting mix does not favor the development of blue flowers. It can be acidic, but it does not have any aluminum in it. So you are not going to be buying a blue hydrangea unless it has been specifically treated by the grower to have blue flowers. But that doesn't mean that it won't change, of course, once it's in your garden and either you're treating it or your conditions are favoring the development of that blue color.
I'm still thinking about Blurple. Sounds like a Sesame Street character.
I like it.
The Cookie Monster was blue, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
Yeah, he was. Anyhow, proceed.
You know
Sorry.
what? That's a good name for a hydrangea. I like it. No, I'm going to keep that on my list for a hydrangea name. Yeah, I like it. So
I want 10% of the royalties.
We will make sure you get some for your garden, at least.
Okay.
So Let's Dance Skyview is a special hydrangea, not just because it is capable of turning this, beautiful sky blue. And I do want to mention that whether or not you have the conditions that favor, the development of blue, hydrangeas are really beautiful as pink.
Oh,
so
incredible.
It's like a lot of people say, "Oh, it's not blue." I'm so disappointed. Well, I mean, they're pretty great when they're pink as well. So it's not one of those things I think you need to, break your neck trying to turn your soil blue when it's going to be so fabulous when it's in the pink or, lavender range as well. So that's but what makes Let's Dance Skyview special is it is one of the newer Let's Dance reblooming hydrangea varieties that is hardy to USDA Zone 4. And we only give that designation to a lot of hydrangea macrophylla or big leaf hydrangeas can survive in USDA Zone 4, but they can't thrive. So they're not really going to do very well. They'll live, they're never going to bloom, and they're not going to do much for you. But in these few hydrangeas that include, so it's Let's Dance Skyview and Let's Dance Can Do, they have the ability to set their flower buds on the entire length of their stem. So old-fashioned types of hydrangeas like the Nico Blue that I mentioned, they primarily set their flower buds just at the terminals, just at the tips of the stems. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so if it gets pruned by someone who doesn't know what they're doing, if it gets hit by frost, if it gets browsed by deer, if it gets, slid into by a softball game, run awry, it's going to, all these things are possible. I've heard it all in my time here. Exactly. So if you lose those tips of the branches anytime from, basically September until it, starts to flower the following season,
the party's over.
There go the flowers. Mm-hmm. Let's Dance Skyview has the ability to set those flower buds down the entire length of the stem. So if it does get pruned accidentally, if it does get winter damage, you still have flower buds down there close to the ground instead of just way up at the top. And so, no matter what happens, you have a better chance at getting flowers than you had with more conventional types of big leaf hydrangeas. So that's something that really is, you really will see the difference with that and Let's Dance Can Do hydrangea. And on top of all of that, so we were selecting for this trait, which can really help people, especially in colder climates, be successful with it. We also want faster reblooming. Mm-hmm. And, big leaf hydrangeas are great. People get really excited because, it's going to keep blooming. But not all of them can rebloom quickly. A lot of them will need, a lot of different varieties will need to put on, say, 6 to 8 sets of leaves before they can create that flower bud, the new wood flower bud. And it's going to need, once those leaves are created, it's going to need extra time to create that. So a lot of times, those new wood flowers, you weren't seeing them until later. So with Let's Dance Skyview, we were looking to decrease that time to rebloom. And so you're getting better preservation of the old wood flowers and better rebloom on the new wood flowers. And all in all, that is going to make a pretty darn attractive package for big leaf hydrangeas. So, this is a newer variety, but I think it should have pretty good availability on the market. And a lot of garden centers right now, even though it's late July, I know we have listeners from all over the country, and some of them are like, the garden center. Yeah, right. It's 120 degrees out here today. But if you do live in a cooler climate, it's not too late to go to your garden center as long as you'll be around, for the next 2 months to water it. It's a really great choice. Now, I do recommend for most people, you're going to want like partial shade. Some sun, and so many people, we've talked about this almost every time we've talked about hydrangeas. People just naturally think they're a shade plant. And they want some shade, and the hotter your climate, the more shade they are going to require. But some sun, ideally in the morning, is really going to give you stronger stems, better resistance to, diseases like powdery mildew and other leaf spots, better flower color. That's, really important, because if it's in too much shade, again, it's going to take on those muddy kind of undertones and not that bright color. And, hydrangea foliage can, obviously, a lot of people resent it because that's all they see, because they're not growing the right kind of hydrangeas and they're not getting the flowers, but it is quite attractive. So you want to do everything you can to make that plant as attractive as possible by giving it the right amount of light. Yes, they want a lot of water. You can help mitigate that with mulch. Hydrangea is one of those must mulch kind of plants, in my opinion. They naturally have shallow roots, so they're going to lose the water that they have really quickly. And because this is a big leaf hydrangea, you know what that means? No pruning, low maintenance. Even though you can prune it, even though it has this ability to set those flower buds down the entire length of its stem, we still don't recommend that you prune it, because if you do, you still are reducing the potential for flower buds to form on it. There's fewer flower buds. And when it comes to hydrangeas, I think we can all agree that more flowers is what we want.
You sold me based on, all those functional aspects of the plant. If you're keeping score at home, we're talking about Let's Dance Skyview Big Leaf Hydrangea in the garden center, Stacey. I just simply, aside from the functional aspects, it is just plain gorgeous. And you mentioned garden centers.
Yes.
In the garden centers, many people may not know this, but in garden centers, many times they'll just dress somebody up to look like a shopper and put some plants on their cart and roll them around the garden center, because people experience something called cart envy.
Oh.
And in the garden center, I have seen people look at Skyview Let's Dance Hydrangea and, wow, what is that? Where'd you get it? I want one for me. So understand that in a garden center, there's something that goes on called cart envy.
Oh, I like that. That happens in the grocery store too.
Yeah, exactly. That looks good. Where'd you get that?
Exactly. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea for dinner. So I hope you've got a fabulous picture of what Let's Dance Skyview Hydrangea looks like in your mind, but you can check that out against the real thing at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. You can check out our show notes. We'll have pictures, all the information you need to know about what makes Let's Dance Skyview special and how you can grow it successfully. We're going to take a little break, and when we come back, we're going to open up that mailbag and answer your questions. So please stay tuned. Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show. It is one of my absolute favorite times of the entire week, because on the Gardening Simplified Show, one of the things that we do to help simplify gardening for you is answer your gardening questions. And being the height of the season, I know there's lots of stuff on everyone's mind, so let's open up the mailbag and see what's out there.
I like it too. I have lots of questions. How did I get here? What am I doing here? Okay, Margot writes to us, I love your show. Rick is so funny and Stacey is so smart. Now, I agree with that, Margot. Thank you. Stacey is one of the smartest people I know, and thank you for recognizing that I have a sense of humus. That's just the way I roll.
That's very nice for you and Margot to say, but I do have to just qualify this a little bit. Gardening is one of those things that is really about experience. Yeah. Yes, there's a lot of things that you can memorize, plant names. I am humbly good at plant identification because I've internalized a lot of that. But like a lot of the advice that I give and things that both you and I say, they come from experience. And in that way, everybody can become a better gardener because it is based on what you observe and experience. And that's why it's so important to, be engaged and to observe what happens no matter what the weather. But Margot, I appreciate you saying so.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And it is true. I mean, all joking aside, I think that's part of what makes this show work too. I have many years of experience in the garden center industry, and so this combination, Stacey, you are the true horticulturist, and I mean that. You're one of the smartest people I know, and so you combine someone like me who's a plant enthusiast with you, a true horticulturist. I think it works.
Oh, thank you. That's so kind of you to say so.
Fun. It's fun. I love doing the show. All right.
do too.
So let's get to Margot's question. Now that we've got that out of the way, I am an entrepreneur. Okay, my question is, I live in the PNW where it can be very damp. Pacific Northwest.
Yes.
I just caught that. Many of my trees and shrubs have been neglected for over 15 to 20 years. Now I'm discovering a lot of moss and lichens covering the branches, and I'm really not liking it. Well done, Margot. Good sense of humor.
She did specifically write lichen, L-I-C-H-E-N. So
I love it.
She knew who she was sending this message to.
I like Margot. How do I rid my garden of this? And I'm going to say right off the top, don't.
I agree.
I like moss. I like lichens.
I also like moss and lichens, and I think that branches, encrusted with different species of moss and lichen are truly, truly beautiful and interesting. And I love going to like more coastal areas. That humidity in the air is where they can really thrive. And it's like a little garden of its own on a branch. And, Margot, Rick and I aren't just telling you this to try to persuade you to come to our side and like it. We're telling you this because there's pretty much nothing you can do. Not to be discouraging. I never would want to just discourage people. But moss is one of those, and lichens as well. And a moss is a combination of a lichen and an algae, so very similar. But if conditions are right for moss to grow, it will. Plain and simple.
Exactly.
That's just how it works.
Soil compaction, shade, moisture, whatever.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of, humidity and all of those factors that go into it. And this is why people can't just say, oh, I want a moss lawn. I'm going to have a moss lawn. Moss is definitely one of those plants. If it can grow, it will. And if it can't, it won't. You can't really force it unless you radically change your conditions. And so there's really nothing that you can do. There's no pesticides, even if you were inclined to spray, that are going to discourage the growth of moss and lichens.
You can spray, but they're simply Band-Aids. If the conditions are right, it's simply going to regrow.
Yeah. And, it's just like you said, Margot, with the humidity in the Pacific Northwest, the moisture in the air, the coolness, those are all conditions that are right for that to grow. So, the spores that these things put out to reproduce are so tiny and so microscopic that there's really nothing you can do to stop them. The good news is that it's rarely a problem. Even if you don't necessarily like it from an aesthetic standpoint, it's not going to harm the plant's health. Especially like the small moss and lichen, it's not going to get really heavy and break branches or anything like that.
Margot, I would accept compliments on its robust growth. Get out there and flex your muscles.
Well, you know what? Margot did include a photo of it, and I felt a little guilty when I opened it because I was like, oh, that's gorgeous. So sorry, Margot. I, again, don't want to discourage you, but we'll put the photo on the show notes and the audience can weigh in as well. But I'm afraid that the best thing here is to just live with it and try to see the beauty and interest in it.
Thanks for the email, Margot. Appreciate it. Christopher writes, hi, Stacey and Rick. My husband and I are huge hydrangea lovers, especially proven winners varieties. Can you talk a little about the difference between the Invincibles, Ruby, Mini Mauvette, Garnetta? What's the other one? Spirit? Is it
Invincible Spirit 2? Yep.
Invincible Spirit 2, yes. Okay. Is it just size or are there other differences? Of course, there are also the Green Blooms, Sublime Ricky.
Yes, Sublime and Lime Ricky. So, so the Invincible series is, we introduced it about 12-ish years ago with Invincible Spirit. And Invincible Spirit was the first pink hydrangea arborescens, or the first pink Annabelle type hydrangea.
Right.
And at the time, it was really quite a breeding breakthrough. It was developed by Dr. Tom Rainey at North Carolina State University, who we've talked about on the show many, many times. And like so many breeding breakthroughs, once you've kind of, cleared that first hurdle of getting a pink flowering plant, the floodgates are open. And so what has happened is that as Tom has continued to develop new varieties, he has a field at his research station in North Carolina with literally hundreds and hundreds of different potential varieties. And with the Invincible series, when it comes to us selecting them, we're selecting for a range of sizes. So we do want, some very, very small ones like Invincible Wee White. And we do want more of the conventional full-size one, like they mentioned Invincible Sublime, which gets to be about 5 feet tall and wide. So we're going for a wide range of sizes and, to some extent, a wide range of bloom times, because some of them will bloom much earlier and some of them will bloom a little bit later in the season. And even though everything in the Invincible series has some ability to rebloom, particularly if you deadhead it, it's not necessary, but if you want to deadhead it, it will put out fresh flowers. You can really extend that season, so you always have fresh flowers through the garden by combining all of these. And of course, the obvious difference is the flower color, which is usually right there in the name. So, what we're trying to do, again, is just to create that sort of palette of a plant that is really familiar to people, that they're comfortable with growing, that they know they can be successful with, but in a wide range of, sizes and styles, so that no matter what your taste, no matter how much space you have, no matter what color palette you're working with, there is an option. But since they pretty much all derive from the same breeding program, they're all similar in terms of their needs and ultimately their performance, how long they bloom, and that kind of thing. So
sure,
they're great plants. And if you, we talked a lot about Let's Dance Skyview in Plants on Trial. So that's going to be like a zone 4 hardy. If you live in a colder climate or you just love the Annabelle type hydrangeas, these are going to be hardy to USDA zone 3 and heat tolerant to USDA zone 8. So a good portion of the country can be successful with them.
Fabulous plants. For people keeping score at home, Stacey, these are what we would consider the arborescens or smooth hydrangeas.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
All right. Pat asks us, I would like to know what thistle plant I can grow in my flower garden that would not be invasive, but yet the goldfinches would eat the seed and use the fluffy material from the thistle flower for nesting. Great question, Pat. That's one of my favorite things about globe thistle, is watching the finches all over it. And when we interviewed the Birdman a few months ago, he, of course, reminded us that finches are late nesters and will take advantage of it.
Yeah, and I was really glad Pat asked this question, too, because I think it's a great one. And she has a really good point, because there are a number of invasive weedy thistles in the U.S. that you certainly would not want to plant in your garden in the attempt to attract goldfinches. But I think, Rick, you really made a great point by mentioning the globe thistle. And so the simple answer here, Pat, is that any plant in the daisy family, in the Asteraceae, almost all of them make some fluff on their seed heads. And those are great choices. Goldfinches are not limited to thistle.
Yes.
They also love milkweed.
Yes.
And milkweed has tons of fluff.
I was going to mention milkweed. Incredible.
And it's coming out at this time of the year. So all of these options, whether they are, out in the wild or in your garden, provide a lot of nesting material. And I've talked about one of the, I think you could say, signature plants in my garden, Silphium perfoliatum, or cup plant, just starting to get going in my garden over the last weekend, covered in goldfinches.
Outstanding.
Yeah. And so anything that has seed at this time of year, the goldfinches will be all too happy to take off your hands.
Yeah, add some echinacea in your garden,
that's a good choice,
sunflowers, and of course zinnias also. I've found finches like zinnias.
Well, you can't beat that color combination.
Can't beat it. All right.
All right. So thank everyone so much for your questions. If you have a question for us, just visit gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. You'll find the show notes as well as a contact form. We're going to take a little break. When we come back, you know what time it is. Branching news. So stay tuned.
Welcome back to the Gardening Simplified show. It's time for branching news. Here's some breaking news. We were chatting during the break, and our amazing engineer and producer Adriana Robinson made a point about the finches, because we're always looking for some fluff for their nesting. You had an idea.
Yeah, hot tip. So I have a Siberian Husky who sheds all the time. all year. And I like to brush him outside because I've noticed that a lot of the goldfinches love to scoop up a lot of that fluffy hair he leaves behind, and they take it for their nest. So you don't have to clean up inside, and you're helping the birds out.
And they probably don't even know the difference between milkweed fluff and atlas fluff. So
it works for me, absolutely.
So
That's
can't
great.
beat that.
All right, you're struggling to feel healthy. A new study revealed how the weather and sunlight played a significant role in us feeling better in the summer than any other time of the year. So 2,000 U.S. adults revealed 75% feel more encouraged and healthy if the weather is perfect and the skies are sunny. I'm kind of like, duh, yeah. So I don't even know why I'm bringing this up other than, again, we garden during the summer season. Don't give up. Keep gardening. And enjoy the sunshine. It's not a fig leaf of your imagination when you're out there in the sunshine working in your garden. You're feeling good.
Yeah, and it's good just to see all of the life. And that's what I really realized recently as I was like, in the winter, things are just so stagnant. You don't get all the change. And
Yep.
If you're sitting outside for even 10 minutes, so much happens, birds and bugs and plants. And that is good for your mood.
It's stimulating. It's all sun and games till you run out of light. And which reminds me, Stacey, soon we'll be talking about our favorite subject.
No.
Daylight saving time. All right, the National Weather Service said this past week it wasn't a large swarm of grasshoppers its radar imaging caught moving into northwest Utah after all. A week after announcing the alarming discovery, the Weather Service reported that further analysis showed that the unusual blip on the radar was most likely caused by material released from a U.S. Air Force base in Nevada. Now that's interesting. The chaff, they call it chaff. A radar, a substance called chaff, a reflective substance deployed by the military to confuse radars or guided missiles. So it wasn't grasshoppers after all. It was this chaff. Interesting. But people just panicked for a little while, thinking there was this huge mass of grasshoppers on radar moving into the area.
Well, that's a scary thought.
Gives me the weekly opportunity to share with you a dad joke. A grasshopper walks into a bar, and the bartender says, "Hey, do you know we have a drink named after you?" And the grasshopper says, "You have a drink named Fred Johnson?" Okay. Drought-stricken Arizona is baking in the searing heat. We've all heard the news of the heat in Arizona. The Scottsdale City Council unanimously agreed this past week to ban natural grass in front of future single-family homes in an effort to conserve water. So they're banning lawns there in Scottsdale.
That's a heavy step, but especially lawns are very water intensive here in Michigan, even in the summer, even in a normal summer when we don't have, as little rain as we've had this year. So in a climate like Arizona, which is a natural desert, that's going to be even more water where water is scarce. So, I think it's really just a matter of just getting people's eyes used to seeing something else. And then it will sort of become a lot less weird to people who are just accustomed to lawns as being the default choice.
Yeah, I think so too. And Stacey, according to this news story, this is the part that I found interesting. According to Scottsdale City Council, feedback gathered from Scottsdale water customers in June found 86% of those who responded supported the ordinance.
Oh, wow, that's good. Glad to hear that.
So I guess not a lot of crankiness going on there. No longer cranky people saying, "Get off my lawn," right?
Well, people are going to go on their lawn because instead of grasses, they'll be planting cactus. Which serves as a very good deterrent.
And some people aren't necessarily into lawn. I mean, some people very much into their lawns, but some people just not into their lawns and the maintenance. I remember once I had an old mower I put out by the road and put a sign next to it that said "free." Someone came by and took the sign, left the mower. True story. So anyhow. All right. I probably should have been more specific with that sign. A woman in Massachusetts decided to buy herself something she's always wanted for her 97th birthday, a top-of-the-line John Deere tractor.
Aw.
Now, that's interesting.
So what's she going to do with it?
She just likes to take her tractor out for a ride for fun, she says. Whether the grass needs cutting or not, I go around, I check and drive around. Her home sits on a beautiful 2.5 acres of land. She says it keeps me busy. And she said even before her husband passed away, the 4-foot, 8-inch firecracker, that's what they're calling her, always had a love of landscaping. She had a push mower when she was a younger girl, but she said, now forget it. I can't push the lawnmower. So she got herself a John Deere tractor.
Wow. Well, 2.2 acres is a lot for a push mower. So I think she should have treated herself a little earlier, frankly.
I think so too. She's now a media sensation. They tractor her down. Recently published research indicates that monarch butterflies live year-round in South Carolina.
What?
Did you catch that?
That's wild. No, I didn't.
We're going to put the story, the link there at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. Please visit our website, gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. Of course, you can send us questions also and take a look at the show notes, and we'll put it there. Yes, recently published research indicates that monarch butterflies live year-round in South Carolina, relying on swamps in spring, summer and fall, and sea islands in the winter. While these monarchs rely heavily on aquatic milkweed as a host plant for their eggs and caterpillars, they were also found to use swallowwort, a viney relative of milkweed that grows near salt marshes and was previously unrecognized as an important host plant for monarchs. So this is pretty interesting. They're establishing monarchs are overwintering in South Carolina rather than migrating to the well-known sites in Mexico.
That's fascinating. I had no idea.
Yeah, so very interesting. Now, of course, the monarchs in this study were more concentrated in maritime habitats, so barrier islands that are directly on the ocean in winter, but pretty widely dispersed. So there you go. Finally, in branching news, this was interesting. A fallen tree blocking a nearby road trapped more than 100 people this past week at the home of Agatha Christie, the late crime writer regarded as the best-selling novelist of all time. One visitor to Christie's Greenway house in England said she arrived at 11:30 in the morning and was stuck there for hours because there's only one road in and out of the area.
That sounds like a mystery in the making.
Exactly. Exactly. So fantastic story. Yes, it's going to require some detective work to figure out why and how this happened. But at the home of Agatha Christie, a fallen tree, and I guess there's worse places to be stuck.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, she was a very avid gardener, in fact. So
exactly.
I'm sure her home there in England has pretty fabulous gardens. And, if there's a place you're going to be stuck, a garden is pretty good place for it.
Thank you so much for watching us on YouTube. Of course, looking for the podcast, share it with friends and neighbors, listening to us on the radio. And Stacey, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick. And thank you, Adriana.
You betcha.
And thank you to our listeners.
Oh, yes, exactly. Big thank you very mulches all around. Thanks, Adriana. Have yourself a great week.